Hi everyone, in this video we're going to look at all the parts of the respiratory system. The learning goals: you can name the parts of the respiratory system and describe their features and functions. You can explain why nose breathing is healthier than mouth breathing. And you can explain how the epiglottis and the uvula help prevent choking. Okay, let's start with the absolute basics. The organs of the respiratory system work together to absorb oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. So that's the main job of the respiratory system. Now let's go step by step to see how this all works. Okay, first of all, air enters the respiratory system through the nasal cavity or the oral cavity into the throat. Later in this video, I'll explain why nose breathing is actually better than mouth breathing. The inhaled air travels past the voice box into the windpipe. And here's an important detail: the windpipe is at the front of your neck. Right behind it is your esophagus, or also called food pipe. And this picture shows it more clearly. So that blue ribbed tube is your windpipe, and right behind it is the esophagus, or the food pipe. And that's why it can feel hard to breathe if you take too big of a bite of food. It presses on your windpipe from behind. Here's a cross-section of the windpipe. As you saw in the image on the left, it contains rings. These are made of cartilage, and they stop the windpipe from collapsing so that air can pass through it easily. Above it, you can see the food pipe. Now notice that the back of the windpipe doesn't have cartilage. That gives the food more, the food pipe more room to expand when food moves through it. And you also can see a little muscle here. If it tightens, so if it contracts, the rings are pulled inward and your windpipe gets narrower. That means less air can get through, and this is the case if you have asthma. The inside of your windpipe also has a lining of mucus that traps dust and dirt, and that lining can swell up during asthma attacks too, so that will make breathing even more difficult. So now the inhaled air is in your windpipe. The windpipe then splits into bronchi, and which in turn split into smaller tubes called bronchioles. At the end of the bronchioles, there are bundles of air sacs called alveoli. And this is where oxygen enters your bloodstream and carbon dioxide moves from the bloodstream into the alveoli to be exhaled. And well, here you can see all the organs that are part of the respiratory system. On the right is a close-up of an alveolus, and tiny blood vessels called capillaries surround each air sac, so alveoli, so gas can exchange quickly. But there's one important part we haven't talked about yet, and that is the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a muscle that separates the thoracic cavity, so the chest cavity, from the abdominal cavity. And the diaphragm is a muscle, and it can move up and down. So why is nose breathing better than mouth breathing? Well, nose breathing is best because inhaled air is filtered, humidified, warmed and checked. And let's go through all four. Inside your nose there are tiny hairs and a mucus layer, and these trap dust and germs so the air gets filtered before it reaches your lungs. And the mucus also moistens the air, and that is important because dry air can irritate your airways and cause infections. There are also a lot of small blood vessels in the nose lining, so in this, in the nose lining, and these blood vessels warm up the air to make it safer for your lungs. Back to the filtering. The shape of your nose on the inside causes the air to swirl as it passes through, and this swirling helps throw dust particles to the side so they stick to the mucus and don't make it to your lungs. Now the last point, so the checking of the air. These photos show miners carrying canaries with them. But why? Back in the days, miners often carried a canary because dangerous gases in the mine could build up without any smell. And canaries have super sensitive lungs, so they would collapse if toxic gas was present. And that was a warning sign for the miners to get out fast. Well, luckily, we can smell lots of things. And thanks to the smell receptors inside our nose, also called the olfactory system, and when you breathe through your nose, you can detect danger much faster. So smell of smoke or spoiled or rotten food. Then the final part of this video. I mentioned earlier that the food pipe is right behind your windpipe. So how do we stop food from going the wrong way? When you swallow food, the uvula closes off the nasal cavity and the epiglottis closes off the windpipe. And here you can see the little flap, that's the epiglottis. It covers the windpipe when you swallow. The one above is the uvula. It moves up to block your nasal cavity. And that way food doesn't shoot up into your nose. If either of these fail, you might choke, and you don't want food or drink to go up into or go down to your windpipe or nose instead. Yes, and that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button if you like this video, and subscribe for more biology lessons. And I'll see you next time.